and welcome to issue 4 of Detective Comments, a Batman podcast. I am James Attias.
And I'm Steve J. Ray. Every issue will look at a different aspect of the Dark Knight over his 10-decade, 85-year history.
And we'll also be looking at members of the Bat family.
And the Caped Crusaders' extensive Rogues Gallery.
And you may notice that today the dynamic duo is a dynamic trio. We are joined by Dan Brazier, or as some of you may know, Spider Dan. Hi, welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you for inducting me into your Rogues Gallery. I'm very, very happy to be visiting Gotham City, away from Prattle World, as we call it, over my podcast. Yes, and talking some wonderful, wonderful quality Batman content. So thank you. And we are going to be talking about Batman Prey by, I want to say, Doug Monk and Paul Gulacy. Munch, is it?
Munch, yeah.
There we go. I've never heard it pronounced, so I just have to guess.
Lovely man.
Lovely man. I'm sure he is. I love his work. Moon Knight, Batman, you name it. Wonderful writer, one of my favorites. And it's an early kind of early 90s, kind of late 80s story. It's set in the early days of Batman, right after kind of year one. And it is Batman Prey. And it is, I remember it being a wonderful story, very dark, very psychologically complex, very unique tale with an unconventional villain. Look at that lovely cover, gorgeous cover we have there. And yeah, I remember it being really, really good. And I thought this is perfect. This is a perfect time. I was looking to, and another beautiful cover. Oh, just gorgeous. And yeah, it was just, I thought, what a perfect opportunity to revisit something I really enjoyed and remember enjoying, but didn't quite remember. Yeah, that's the best one.
Ooh,
that's the best one. Yeah, by far. The issue 3's cover is the best, which is what they use on the collection as well, which is, lovely one as well. But yeah. Oh, they're all good. They're all great, these covers. They're fantastic. But yeah, I decided to choose it because I remember it being excellent. I remember it being really good. And I remember it being something a bit different from the usual kind of Batman fare. Again, it delves into the dark kind of psychology of all these characters, the villains, Gordon, Batman himself, and how this kind of world can affect you, and the trauma and the obsession and that compulsion to be better than Batman, or to be Batman, or to be greater than oneself, and the way you will push yourself to your absolute limits, your breaking point, to become either the predator or the prey, as we find out in the story.
And you thought you'd find yourself a couple of big old nerds who'd be able to talk about it like it was yesterday, and like it was fresh off the print. But
well, I finished my reread today, and for those listeners who can't see our heroic visages on YouTube, yes, I was flashing the original 5 covers from the Legends of the Dark Knight series from back in the day, like you said. Yeah,
it wasn't the first Hugo Strange Batman villain story, as he was one of the first villains ever. Many
recurring.
But it was it his first return?
First recurring villain, yeah.
A recurring villain, sorry, yes.
Batman's first ever recurring villain, yeah.
He predates Lex Luthor by 2 months as well.
And the Joker and all of them.
Yeah. He's the one. He's the guy, which is, I think, why they keep coming back to him, because he's kind of the original Moriarty to Batman Sherlock Holmes.
But let's be honest, this is one of his best stories.
Yeah.
100%.
He is off his nut.
It showed how nuts he was, didn't it?
Uh-huh.
I remember, I being a little younger than the Batman to my Robin of Steve, I only read this probably about 3, 4, 5 years ago for the first time. And I remember when I was reading it, because I've always had this picture of Hugo Strange wearing the bat suit in my head. And it was probably from other stories where it was like Tales of Hugo Strange or something like that. And I remember reading it, and I saw him put on the bat suit in it. I was like, oh, okay, this is where that's from. And he was talking to someone, and then he turned around, it's a mannequin in like lingerie. And I'm like, okay, here we are. That's it. It's all righty.
Because this story could be the route to all of those. I think you're probably talking about the classic Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers run of the 70s. And that's when he really hit his stride and became a mainstay and was killed and wasn't dead and all that stuff with Rupert Thorne. So that's probably the stories you're thinking about, I think.
I think it was, were these strange apparitions, I think it was called, the collection.
I think they reprinted that as a trade. It's called Strange Apparitions in recent years. Yeah.
That's he definitely. I think that's the first time he dons the bat suit, because I think before then he was more like the mad scientist type. I think one of his earlier adventures in the 30s, 40s, the Night of the Monster Men, and they kind of come back to that, I think, in Batman, in the Rebirth era of Batman. I think they re-return to that idea and him being more of a mad scientist.
Before, there was another run by the wonderful Matt Wagner shortly after Legends of the Dark Knight, which was 2 6-issue miniseries called Batman and the Monster Men and Batman and the Mad Monk, which almost slot perfectly directly after this story. And even the art and everything else just fits in, because Matt Wagner, simple, effective, and he's another David Mazzucchelli, Alex Toth type, brilliant high contrast black and white artist. If you haven't read those, Dan or James,
you know what, I haven't.
Pick them up.
I did try and get a copy, but I remember them being really expensive. I just never bothered in the end.
They were out of print when I was in the stores. So yeah, it's quite difficult to get your hands on them, but they're definitely worth a read if you do.
That's why sometimes it's great being old and being around when they came out in the first place.
Yep.
But anyway, we digress already. The tangent has struck. Let's talk about Batman Prey. Dan, from chapter 1. Let's hit it, mate.
Let's go. Well, we're kind of in the, I guess, in kind of like downtown Gotham. I don't think they specify exactly where it is, but I guess, kind of the rougher area. Well, we could say the crime alley kind of area. And it's very, there's a visual similarity in a lot of ways to Year One. I think it might even be the same area where like Catwoman and he's dressed with the scar in Year One. And he's kind of undercover, but he's trying to figure out how to do this. How do I strike fear and things like that, which I think is a wonderful. And again, Mazzucchelli is amazing. Just wonderful artist during that. Oh, exactly. Absolutely. Like Daredevil, I might be a Spider-Man fan and a Batman fan, but Daredevil Born Again, I think, has to be my favorite superhero comic. And Mazzucchelli is a big part of that. And so we see a lot of there's a lot of pulling from that, a lot of the ideas that were explored there briefly, and the visual style and the way the characters are presented in certain ways. And it's a police sting operation. They're trying to get, not a very good one, to be honest, pretty poor. Even Batman's like commenting how rubbish it is, basically. And then all of a sudden Batman comes in, scoops him up, goes into this kind of this. I can't remember what they're called in the cinemas, but the kind of big signs. Yeah, that kind of thing. The yawning, that's probably it. He takes him up there, absolutely does some kung fu, kicking his ass type thing, and then they get all the police on the ground are like so helpless, and they feel helpless, and you've got I think it's Lieutenant Max Court, who becomes a big character in this, who's getting very frustrated because he's ruined his sting. He's an offense to police officers everywhere. He tells Gordon, he's like, we need to crack down. He's illegal. This is illegal. Being a vigilante goes against everything we stand for as police. And Gordon's like, I better keep an eye on this guy. He's a bit of an obsessive, and he's like a muscle bound freak. He works out all the time and
has an aggressive police moustache, like
yes, very strong,
evil village people moustache, definitely.
Yes. Definite, 100%. I wouldn't mess with him though. I would not mess with him. I think, it doesn't end quite well for the police. It doesn't end quite well for Batman. It's not satisfying for anybody. And then Gordon's talking to Court about this, and then Gordon has to go to a TV interview with the mayor, whoever's interviewing them, and Hugo Strange is also there. So this is I think this is his first appearance, kind of post-crisis, I think, in the continuity, if I remember rightly. And in this one, he's not quite muscle-bound or physically agile. He's not a mad scientist. He is just a psychologist, a very very disturbed psychologist, but he is one. And the mayor kind of takes umbrage with Gordon defending Batman and the idea of Batman, that the city might need a Batman or need an ideal to, to go towards, veer into the light, as opposed to all this grim, dark, gritty thing that Gotham is. And the mayor goes immediately, right, we need a vigilante task force. And this happens a lot in kind of Batman stories. We see that he has a not the best relationship with the police, but Gordon's on his side for the most part. But even in this, Gordon's quite hands off, I think, in this story a little bit, because he's still not sure about him. And even Batman's not quite sure about Gordon, but he believes in him. And then I think he hires Max Cork because he thinks he'll do a bad job at it.
Yep.
Because he's not quite the police officer he would want.
Tracks him down in the gym, absolutely lifting what looks to be the weight of a truck with sweat rippling off his
like a beast.
Yeah. We've got to build up that he is a physical presence and that he could, handle himself. And I think that's a good way of doing it, but also that he's like an absolute meathead as well. And we see that the mayor actually recruits Hugo Strange into this task force as a consultant because he has a psychological kind of. He's got an in. He's not quite as brilliant as he likes to believe, which I like.
But he can talk.
Yeah, he can talk the talk, and some of it is right. He gets some. He goes, yeah, there was a tragic, there was trauma there, some dark night, some horrible thing happened, probably crime related. But he misses certain things. Like Gordon notices, he goes, he's not got it because he doesn't know how long it would take for someone to become something like Batman. He's like, it must have only happened in the last 5 years or so.
Last 5 years, and he suspects he's lost a loved one, most likely a wife or girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wife or girlfriend he gets wrong. Last 5 years of training, and I think they mentioned that it's around 12 years he's been training at this point in this story. And he's like, he's fighting crime at night, so most likely he doesn't have a day job. So he gets like a few good points on him, enough that it's like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. They're like, this guy knows what he's talking about, but they've got nothing to base it against.
Yeah,
and I think they make 2 references to Batman Year One quite early on. They talk about Catwoman because he
and she appears
starting a fight with a strong hooker or something, and it was quite like the way he words it. I was just like, oh my,
shocking.
And
I want to come back to that as well, because Frank Miller, and I've spoken to the man, and it's stated he's never ever called Selina a hooker or made her a hooker. She was a dominatrix. She was fully dressed in that scene, and the person she's with said, Selina, don't stop. If she's already started and she's fully dressed, she's not a hooker. It was Denny O'Neil and later writers like Doug Moench and stuff like that just thought, okay, she's a hooker. Frank Miller never intended that, and that was never the case.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Gordon says about him saving his son, obviously at the end of Batman Year One, so he's like, oh, I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. He saved my son. You're like, we know what you're talking about there, Jimbo. So it's like they heavily try and say this is part of Year One. You remember that really cool book, Year One? This is that.
This is Year One, day one, or Year Two, day one, kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like Christopher Nolan and the writers are like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
They read this. There's no doubt in my mind they read this. I think there was even a rumor at a point where Tom Hardy was cast and he was going to be. There was rumors going around that he was Hugo Strange, but then it was like, oh no, he's Killer Croc, and then he turned into Bane.
Harvey Bullock.
Yeah. I heard that as well. I remember that rumor as well. So, but there's lines in here like, Catherine, the mayor's daughter, says, how do you measure a man by his deeds? Yeah, by his deeds, and and what I do that defines me. All that. And then again, there's that moment where Jim's like, oh, I need to thank you for saving my son. He's like, you never have to thank me. You never will. And I was like, yeah, spot on. Like just scenes, just like little scenes. I was like, yeah, they've just gone, yeah, love that, have that. And I think that's why it kind of works as well. It kind of, there's a nice kind of blending of that. And again, I think with Year One, there are some hard edges to that story. And I think Legends of the Dark Knight, which I think is probably the series I've read the most out of all the Batman kind of comic book runs, because I like early Batman because I like how vulnerable he is. I like that he's not the Bat God, that he can defeat anybody with planning time and everything, prep time. He's the prep time god. I like that it still affects him and that he's questioning what he's doing. And like when Hugo Strange is, examining him, and he's sat there and he's been bandaged up by Alfred and he's crushing his whiskey glass or whatever's it. He doesn't drink, but whatever's in there, and scars his hand. Like, it's getting to him because he's like, oh, he must be schizophrenic. And Batman's like, maybe I am schizophrenic. Like, it's getting under his skin.
Up the radio, listening to it, and he's about to smash it, and he's like, no, I'm not crazy. It reminds me of Mask of the Phantasm, where he's like, I've pressed your tights and I've reloaded your... but you didn't smash the radio, so you're fine.
But I love what you both said about the ties to Year One, because you're absolutely right. Year One was like, and it still is, it's one of those perfect stories you can just read, put away, and you don't have to read anything ever again. But what this story does beautifully, Prey, is take the foundation that Year One built and then make it grow, build up on it in a strong way. Like, if you just read Year One and then read normal Batman comics, that relationship between Batman and Gordon, it's too easy. There has to be more to it. And the fact that the police are still after Batman, even though Gordon's defended him and is working with him in secret, the whole task force, and Gordon being drafted against his will to lead it, caught, and that strengthening of that friendship, more than a partnership between Bruce and James Gordon, is one of the best parts of this whole story for me. And I haven't read this in like 10, 15 years. I need to pick up a collected edition because I've only got the original 5, and they're priceless to me. That is what I love about Prey. It's just like Batman Year One. It builds on Batman Year One, but then you get that hyper-realistic, anatomically amazing Paul Galassi art, which totally takes it away from Year One. And again, because of the birth of the Batmobile and several other things that happen in this story, this is a perfect 5-issue art you can give to anybody and say, you want to see about Batman's early years? Read this. So I'm really glad you guys brought that up.
I've got one for you. Usually, for our loyal listeners, we start with a jumping off point or like a question that is a surprise to one of us. So I'm gonna surprise you both with something related to Batman Prey. Is Batman Prey more of a sequel to Batman Year One than Batman Year Two?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, that's the discussion over. Steve has spoken.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, think about it
perfectly.
It does.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Year Two's a fun. I've got a strange relationship with that book. Like, I love Todd McFarlane. I love his work. However you feel about his style I do appreciate it. Again, I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and he was a big kind of Spider-Man artist. So he made him all creepy and he had all the hands. It made him more spider-like, which I kind of liked. But yeah, I like Alan Davis. I met Alan Davis a few years back. He was
another lovely man.
A lovely guy, yeah. Again, he drew me a Green Goblin, amazing sketch. I've got that somewhere. I can't remember where I put it, but I have it. And yeah, I love both of their art styles. I read the sequel as well, which was, I think, called Full Circle, where it brings back the character of the Reaper.
Yeah.
And obviously it influenced an even better kind of Year One, Year Two story in Mask of the Phantasm, which, again,
still the greatest Batman movie ever made, in my humble opinion.
Easy. And
you're always in agreement.
Yeah, I can't really argue with, like, why would you argue that point? I can't argue. Nobody could argue that point. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's some people say Long Halloween is kind of a Year Two as well, a little bit. There's or maybe even a Year Three, perhaps. I'm not sure. Like, it depends on wherever you want to put it. I'm very loose with the timelines for stuff like
because
this.
Of the introduction of Dick Grayson, Robin, it's more Year Three, which is why I feel stories like Shaman, Prey, Gothic really fit in directly after Batman Year One.
And you think about all the villains that are in the Long Halloween, they will have had to have been established. They will have all been around for a while. Like, so you got to give, like, it's the same as Hush. You don't just jump into Hush. You have to have a lot of backstory.
Yeah, agreed. I agree. I think it's the Roman, it's the Roman and Catwoman's appearances and things. They feel like they continue on almost immediately after year one. But I get what you mean with all the other villains being established and things. Absolutely,
they could all happen concurrently. I mean, with comics, these stories could happen within pages of each other's slot in PC. I mean, if you look at issue 1 of Shaman, the first 5-10 pages fit before year one, and the rest of it are completely after year one. So,
yeah, it's a wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey,
Spider Danny, James Attias, Bat Hat-Man kind of mess.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, I do think this is because again, tonally, I think it's the same. Visually, I think it's very similar, but also it kind of, again, it adds a few more kind of layers to it, the kind of classic elements, like we get the Batmobile, first appearance of the Batmobile, and I guess the first appearance of the Bat Signal as well. So yeah, kind of proto versions of those at the very least. So yeah, I agree with you. I have to agree with you.
So you know how they always say in Batman, Bane broke his body, and the like different, like Talia broke his heart. Is this Hugo Strange trying to break his mind? Because eventually it is mind versus mind. It's the psychological attacks. Like he knows he knows how to hit him hard and how to hurt him. Because obviously Court doesn't stay Court. He gets hypnotized. And let's go from there. Like, how is he trying to break Batman's mind and therefore break the Bat?
That's deep. I like that. I like that a lot. But yeah, he was one of the very first to attack by Batman's psychology because, like you said, James, earlier, brilliantly, he gets it. He does get a lot of the facts right from the beginning. It's only his ego and his own self-belief that stop him thinking a bit more outside the box. There's no way Batman could be as well trained or do what he does in that space of time. And also the fact that he is so, and it's brilliantly done, jealous of Batman and the freedom that the mask and the costume gives him. And like you said earlier, Dan, he's the mad scientist, but he's definitely also mad. He is completely unhinged. The whole talking to the mannequin, the way he treats Catherine, the mayor's daughter, you really want to hate this guy. And it's so brilliantly written. I mean, Doug Moench, we know, Batman legend, over a decade writing Batman detective comics, everything else. And obviously a long-standing relationship with Paul Gulacy as well, from 9 years on Marvel's Master of Kung Fu, 6 from Sirius, they did together as well. They are a match made in heaven when it comes to writing and art. Everything just works as a synthesis of both their brains, and it's beautiful to look at and to read.
Well, that's why I think the Night Scourge looks like he does. I was like, you've got Paul Gulacy, you've got everybody, the whole team's here from Master of Kung Fu, so of course he's going to look like a ninja, isn't he?
Yep.
I was like, again, everything about Max Court does not shout ninja to me on any level, but the outfit they give him, I'm like, yep, it's a ninja, and I know why they've done that. I know
but he's
that
clearly
why
a trained martial artist, because he does. He can't hold up to Batman, obviously. Granted, clearly not, but he does stand up to him and does get a few hits in, which is more than a lot of people can say. So I'm saying definite martial arts training, possible military Green Beret training. The guy is a force to reckon, and he's built like a brick privy. So there's definitely some real weight behind his blows.
I've got a question as well. So in like a lot of the future appearances of Hugo Strange and the previous appearances, he's quite physically capable himself. He looks good in the bat suit. He can handle himself. He can fight Batman hand to hand. Why do you think that they decided to make Max Court kind of an extension of his kind of, the physicality and the mentality of Hugo Strange? Was it maybe to add a bit more realism, that he was just kind of a weirdly kind of psychologist?
I can see James's brain ticking the exact same way mine is. He's going to say exactly what I was going to say.
This story, when, like you mentioned earlier, with the mayor's daughter, Hugo Strange is speaking to her, and he's speaking to the mannequin, and he feels like they're laughing at him. And he talks about how he's like, well, maybe I'm not as physically endowed as this Batman. Maybe I'm not. And like, in this, he's short, maybe, because obviously you see Bruce Wayne towering above him. Short, glasses, bald, like thinks people are laughing at him. They paint him as like having real little man syndrome. So then who's he going to look to but this tall police officer, huge Tom Selleck moustache, who's like, okay, that guy could be Batman, that guy could beat Batman, and go from there. Like he picks his polar opposite and then as an extension. And then obviously when Hugo Strange, when we see him in other iterations, he's big, he's built. He did make Monster Men, so there's a great chance he could have, made himself into a bit of a monster. A little bit of substance. But I think this story is all about Hugo Strange's shortcomings and then trying to reflect that on Batman, who is the perfect specimen, isn't he? He's meant to be the alpha male that cannot be beat by anyone who is less than a metahuman. So obviously he finds this police officer, hypnotizes him into becoming the Night Scourge, and who also, I felt like he reminds me a lot of Lockup from Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, a little bit.
And obviously prison guard-esque style, but like you mentioned, Master of Kung Fu, he's dressed like a ninja. But yeah, I feel like the whole the court and Hugo Strange thing is little man and big man kind of thing.
It's the seeds that the Hugo Strange everyone knows and hates today grew from. It's that simple. It's great because it strips him right back to his essence and shows the birth of his psychosis and his mania and his obsession with Batman and wanting to be Batman and best Batman. But yes, he does grow almost a foot between his early appearances in stories like this and Monster Men and when we see him in his 70s heyday and even in the present. So I definitely think some roids or venom or something is involved, no doubt.
You reminded me, they mentioned Santa Prisca quite a lot.
Oh, yes. That's Denny O'Neill's wonderful editing, along with Archie Goodwin, tying in separate stories by separate creative teams to tell a cohesive story which was leading into Nightfall.
Santa Prisca. Oh, yeah, there's some great substance.
And the Venom 5-issue story, which follows this one.
Yes, I covered it on my own podcast very early on. One of my absolute favourite Batman stories. Again, very early. I think I did 10 Nights of the Beast as well, and a couple of others. I think we did Batman Going Sane as well, where the Joker seemingly kills Batman, and he goes, "You know what? I'm just going to lead a normal life now." Very interesting story, very unique. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's such a strong version of, like, this is my version of Hugo Strange. Whenever I look to Hugo Strange, this is the version I look for. I've gone back. I've read the earlier appearances. There was a graphic novel. I grew up with the earlier
appearances, and I agree with you, Dan. I grew up with the Englehart Rogers, and I still think that this is the definitive Hugo Strange origin story. It's wonderful.
I'm gonna throw in a batarang into the works here and say my favorite version of Hugo Strange is in Arkham City, the video game.
I don't do video games, so I can't comment.
You go on YouTube and you watch the full cut scenes like it's a nice 11-hour movie, and you thank me later. It's wonderful, and they take elements from all of his stories for the Arkham City version. Like, he's manipulative. He works out who Batman is. Like, it's just so good, and comes up with the plan to control Gotham by paneling off a little part of it. And that is Arkham City now, and it's just so good. Then the voice, I will always hear the voice when I'm reading the comics from the game.
Yeah, deep booming, this deep like Batman.
Yeah,
whatever he was doing. A wonderful game, wonderful stuff. Written by Paul Dini, so you're very familiar. Voiced by a lot of the cast, like Kevin Conroy was back.
We like Paul Dini, and we like
exactly.
We like Paul Dini a lot.
Of course. The backgrounds say it enough, guys. It's I think I'm getting the gist. Mask of the Phantasm, all of this. But absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't say I'm a huge gamer, but I did play that, and it's one of the best superhero games ever made. Chef's kiss, exactly. They use Hugo Strange in a very unique, interesting way. It's sort of new, but yet classic at the same time. Timeless.
I love it when we just all agree that.
I just love the fact that you think that I can spend 11 hours watching this stuff when I could barely have time to sit down and watch a 2-hour movie with my life and 3 websites and podcasts and 15,000 comics that I must read constantly, incessantly on a daily basis, or my head will explode and my entire family will die. So it's nice that you can think that way. But anyway, back to Prey. So yeah, I mean, we come to the introduction and seeing Batman at odds with the police and wanting to strengthen his relationship with them, and then the spanner in the works of Strange and Court, then eventually working together. But I want to ask you both, obviously, clearly Hugo's attacking his mind, Court's attacking his body. But what do you think about the spanner in the works like Selina and the mayor and the politics of Gotham City that are thrown in as well? Because they're lovely little touches that add an extra dimension and layer to this story as well, I think.
Selina keeps getting like his sidekick, his partner in crime, and she's like, I am my own person. And she finds herself angry at him. She's like, what do I have to do around here just to be like, leave me be? Like that gives me a chuckle, because obviously sometimes she can cause him grief, but then she can also help him out, which is a great thing. And the mayor and the politics. How many mayors has Gotham City had? How many times we're like, oh, vote
and
me?
How many of them have been worth having?
I did get a lot of kind of I think it's Mayor Hill in the animated series. Am I right, Mayor Hill? Yeah, I got a lot of vibes from him. Like, I don't like Batman and I want to get reelected. And he's always on at Gordon for doing something about it. And yeah, I got a lot of those vibes from this. With Selina, I kind of felt she was a little bit underutilized. I feel just a touch. I felt like there was because it was like, oh, she's robbing somewhere, and that's it. Next issue, she robs another place. That's it. Gets annoyed at Batman looking at the newspaper, and then the Night Scourge goes after her and attacks her, and then Batman tries to save her, but then she attacks Batman because she's. I think there's a lot of projecting on this. Like, everyone's having their own issues, but they're projecting it on other people. It's like Strange and Court are like, I want to be a more manly man. I want to be the manliest man, and Batman's the manliest man while also being a bat. But I'm gonna be better, and I think she's important to the story in a way because it showcases the toxic masculinity and the misogyny that these two characters hugely have. Like you said, the way Hugo Strange treats women and the mannequins as well. Like, don't talk down to me, and slapping them and stuff, and all that kind of inherent kind of horrible, like disgusting kind of ickiness about it. But I think that only strengthens the story in so many ways. But I do think Selina kind of just dips in and out a little too in such a short, small burst. I kind of wanted her to say and do more and be more involved, but unfortunately she never really was there when I was like, I don't think that she was used in the right way. I like her as a character and she's a classic, but I think she could have been utilized better within the story. But also, I think I would, if it was me, I think I would struggle to fit her in somewhere.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in a short story, isn't there? But you made me think there was 3 elements.
You hit it. You hit the nail on the head, Dan. She was there to show that, yes, we're showing these curvy, semi-naked women in hot tubs or whatever else, and in the forms of mannequins and in the mayor's daughter. But that isn't how we see women. This is Selina. She's there more to prove a point than to be part of the main story. I think that's the way I read it.
I think that is why she's there, and I think that's why she comes in, and she does help, Batman defeat the Night Scourge and comes to assist, like when actually, she almost got him killed at one point. She's not all bad.
Young love.
That's her save the puppy moment, I guess you call it. And yeah, but I agree. But I felt like there was maybe more, just a little bit more they could have done with her, just added a bit more dialogue, or just give me a little bit more of a taste that where she is kind of psychologically, where she is in the story, where she is in her own journey. But again, maybe that's another story that this one just isn't for.
Yeah. So I have three things in this story that made me laugh, and I want to know what you guys think of them. One was when Batman, he hasn't got his Batmobile yet, So he's getting into the city on his glider, and he gets wounded, he gets beat up, and he has to get back home, but the glider's obviously too far away. So he arrives back to walk
all the way home.
Had to walk all the way home. Like, you imagine you're walking, like, or you're driving to the airport in Gotham, and you drive past Batman.
And Wayne Manor's way out of the burbs as well. It's outside the city.
That made me chuckle when he gets home and he's like, had to walk home. Like, because I've thought about the amount of times I've missed a train and I had to walk home. The second was Hugo Strange putting a neurotoxin in the head of his mannequin, because he knew that at some point Batman was going to hit it or like do something to this mannequin. He was like, I booby trapped the mannequin head. That made me chuckle. And the last one was, at some point Hugo Strange works out, or he thinks he works out, who Batman is. So he has mannequins of Bruce's parents at Wayne Manor with a tape recording, and he says, that was my voice you heard as your father's. Was Hugo Strange sitting recording into this tape recorder like, hello, Bruce, this is your dad. Those three moments for me. Like, and also I feel like there was a bit where it was his mum speaking, and I was thinking about Hugo Strange going like, and I'm so proud of you as well. Like, just
no, that was Catherine. That was the mayor's daughter.
Yeah, that was Catherine. Voice. Yeah,
okay.
He gets
under duress.
Because he goes, oh, you performed wonderfully tonight. I think it's before you actually hear it, the recordings. Yeah. I think he goes, you performed wonderfully tonight or something.
Okay, that one. Oh,
the scene that made me laugh is when he's going after. I think it's. I think is called Fish, which is the kind of the gangster he misses out on.
Oh yeah.
But then finds later, and there's a naked woman in the hot tub with him, and he puts a towel on, goes out with a pump action shotgun. And then Batman like fights him, like knocks him on his ass, hits him with a bar stool, all of that, and then he goes back into the bathroom with the woman. And she's like, oh, and he goes, he's gonna need some pants.
You posted that on Discord, and it really made me laugh.
Yeah, like that was my favorite out of context comic book.
I mean, because if you read that, you think, what the. Who with what? Why? And when you read it in the story, oh yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, in context it makes sense, but out of context it was just so random. I loved it.
And vintage Galassi.
Yeah, some moments you just have to take, like, this is a man dressed like a bat with a cape fighting against these like real gruff looking like the bat kind of people. You have to like enjoy it, because some bits are going to be a little bit silly, especially like when time goes on. Like, obviously Selina, the best cat burglar in the world, is leaving with like a bag that's got like dollar signs on it and stuff. Like, you have to think about her swag, and like these days all she would need is like a USB and she'd have billions. Like times change, and you have to really just enjoy things for what they were at the time. Like, these little moments for me, they make it better. I enjoy it. Like,
I think you've got to have Batman as dark or as grim or as realistic as we want to get it. You've still got to kind of have a little bit of camp. Like, it's still a guy dressed as a bat jumping from rooftop to rooftop. You've got to have just a little slither of the camp. Even, you don't have to go all the way Batman and Robin style, but you've got to have like just a flavor of it, just a little bit. I wanted to ask you guys, I think my favorite issue is, you were talking about the neurotoxin. I think this is where Paul Galassi goes absolutely insane with his artwork. I think it's called Nightmare. I think it's issue 4. And it's
the eyes. The eyes.
And it is like one of those episodes of Batman the Animated Series where he's reliving the night, or he's having a nightmare, and the gun's coming up and it's dripping blood, and all that wonderful, beautiful imagery in that front cover where it's just him kind of hunched over in the Batman. It's this wonderful kind of red, almost painted cover. All the imagery, that whole issue, I thought was wonderful. Like, sometimes I'm not a big fan of kind of dream sequences or hallucinations, and sometimes they work for me and within the story, and sometimes they're just entertaining as they are. But I think this one works contextually and kind of visually, and it's just a beautiful issue, just a superb bit of artwork.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, even though we've seen Batman's parents die a million times by now, the heightened reality, the drug-induced psychosis of it in this issue, and Paul Galassi's art, like you said, just makes it different, makes it special, makes it scary. And you feel, I think, a little bit more about how Bruce feels about it than you do in other iterations. And that's something I completely forgot about. So I'm really glad that you brought this story back into my line of view, because it's far better than I remember, and one I will read again a bit more frequently because of it, because of the quality of the writing and the art. Absolutely. Sorry, James, I think you were going to jump in when I rudely interrupted.
Oh, I was just going to talk about how dream sequences, like, they're really hit and miss. That was all. Like, sometimes you'd be like, okay, like with Tom King's Batman run, after the wedding, before, like, when there was a whole different bunch of dream sequences, because he was hooked up to the same machine as he was in Final Crisis, and it was just all hallucinations with different characters. Like, he was doing some stories with Constantine, some stories with Catwoman, and like that stuff. You don't know if it's a dream sequence. You don't know if it's real. You don't know if he's woken up. Sometimes when it's really obscure, you're like, okay, it's a dream sequence. Like, is there going to be any consequence? But like in this iteration, this is still an early Batman. This is a year 2, year 3 Batman that can be defeated. He's not Bat-God, but which, by the way, I'm a big fan of. He can be anyone for prep time. Steve and I are going to be discussing definitely at some point in Detective Comics. You heard it here first.
We will be discussing that topic. Yes, definitely.
But at this point, he gets hit, he gets stabbed, he gets punched, he gets shot. Like, you're like, okay, this guy hasn't got the Bat-God protection yet. And the dream sequence, like, this could break him. This could push him over the edge. Like, anything could happen. Like, all of a sudden he could be like, that dream has changed me forever, Alfred. And then new character arc. So I really, really enjoyed it in this particular issue. There's been others where I haven't, but this one I thought it was great.
Yeah, and when he ends up in the cave and he wants to be left alone, he doesn't want to eat. And again, we were talking about Batman Venom, and it was very much like that when he's trying to come off Venom, and he's, you know, again, he's like down there, and he's got a big beard, he's foaming at the mouth, you know. It was a little bit of that. It was not quite as extreme or cartoony as that, but I still appreciated the kind of deep, dark kind of hole he went down psychologically and within the cave, and he feels safer in the cave because this is where he was born. This is where Batman was born, so to speak. And even hits Alfred in his panic and in his the hallucination and the
that hit me.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
Yeah, no, but it surprised me. But there's moments, I think, with, you know, there's like Hank Pym, and there's even Spider-Man hits Mary Jane during the Clone Saga at one point because of his just, you know, emotional turmoil.
Tony Stark hits the ball frequently.
Yeah. And well, he fired Jarvis. He didn't hit him, but he fired Jarvis at the time. He was like, "I'm a drunk and you're rubbish. Get out." But yeah, like I did because it, and again, you don't really see the injury, and you don't see Alfred's reaction to it. He just is like, "Are you okay now? Would you like some food? Please eat something." You know, he's already kind of forgiven him, which I found quite interesting as well. But then it was like, you know what's going to fix me psychologically? Building a car. That's what's going to fix everything.
Oh,
boys and their toys.
I've got a project that, like, I won't think about the dark. You know, I won't go to therapy like everybody should do. I'm just gonna build a car, like a
huge psychological problems will take a back burner to this beast.
It'll take a back burner to this afterburner.
But let's be fair here. I mean, because I've read this fresh, I only finished it today. He talks about that car almost from the first page of the first chapter. I can't do this. I need a car. I need a car. I need to have the car. I've got to have the car. So that to me is his psychological crutch, is something to hold on to. And to me, that just works because he's always struck me as, obviously, he's a creature of pure logic, like the Joker's a creature of pure insanity. That Batman needs to have that goal, that focus, even if it's a random focus like building a car, to keep his mission going. And on new points about the cave, I need to, obviously, we're talking about Doug Moench and Paul Galassi till the cows come home. But I really want to shout out to the letterer John Costanza for this story. Because if you notice the parts in the cave where Bruce is speaking, because you don't see him, it's all disembodied. The speech bubbles don't have the little tail, so they're coming from absolutely anywhere. And it's little touches like that make me think, well, that's what letterers do. People who don't know what a letterer does. This is art. This is John Costanza just being amazing. And that's another part that elevates this story because everything about it is great. Script, art, colours, letters, the whole shebang. So yeah, building the car, we laugh at it, but I think that's Batman. I think that's very Batman.
And it's fun to think about, like, his original vision. I'm a creature of the night, like hide in the shadows, strike fear. He, like, why would it come to you? He's like, I'm going to need to get to and from the crime. That would be second nature. He would be too busy thinking about how he's going to make himself the most terrifying, like, black shape that comes out of the shadows and just terrifies criminals, the superstitious, cowardly lot. Whereas then he's escalation. We'll go back to Batman Begins at the ending. Oh, the criminals are driving away. No, it's not quite going to work out. You can't. But then he gets his grapple gun, he gets his glider, and then he gets his car. And the car, it felt quite similar to the Batman with Robert Pattinson, like the lights emerging
and the noise,
the
growl of the engine. Again,
that is a terrifying sequence when that, like, and then you're like, oh my god, and it's the Penguin. He's like, oh my god, you know. But you're like, I'm kind of scared for you, Penguin, right now. I'm kind of afraid for you because this is going to absolutely obliterate you. It does.
We are in trouble now.
Yeah, exactly. You made me remember when you were talking about Batman Walking Home. I remember reading the Avengers, I think it's the Korvac saga, where they all kind of die and they're resurrected. Yeah, but I remember in that storyline, the Avengers have to catch the bus because their Quinjet's destroyed. And I was like, well, Batman
I
Walking Home,
loud, mate.
Yeah, I did as well. I was like, I can't believe they've done this. I was like, I think I posted it. I was like, things you'll never see in a Marvel Avengers movie. You'll never see them catch the bus. But yeah, it made me chuckle as well. I was just
we saw them eating shawarma.
Yeah, true. No, fair enough. There are those relatable moments. Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah,
it's always Spider-Man that gets the. What is he going to do if he can't web? There's no skyscrapers. There's no lampposts. Like, if he's in a field, how's he going to get home? It's like, thwip, and it's on nothing. So he's walking home as well. Like, this is the first time, like, for me, when you see a superhero, like, right, how am I going to get home? Like, and you'd immediately think, wouldn't he call Alfred, or wouldn't he? What he tends to do in modern comics now is he'll steal a car and say, like, I owe you somewhere, and then the next issue or later on, you'll see he buys the person a brand new car type thing. Whereas in this one, he was like, no, can't think of anything. Like, stretching, I'm going to walk. Like,
but I think in a way
it made so much sense in the late 70s that he moves to the centre of Gotham City and into Wayne Tower. Mm-hmm. I mean, Wayne's living out in the sticks in that big old empty house. Alfred's cooking, I guess.
Probably. But yeah, no, I think it's almost like he's punishing himself a little bit as well. Like he's trying to become less human. He's trying to become the bat, something mythical and elemental. And that there's a self-loathing, I think, to it as well. Like there's like what he's had to become to get the effect he needs, to make sure it doesn't happen to another child again. He's having to become something that, he's embracing it, and he's found all these ways to be what he needs to be, but also that has a physical and, mental detriment to him as well. Did you guys like when the kind of, when he pulls the rug out of kind of Hugo Strange's manipulation of his own kind of, he's like, any bad dreams, Batman? And he go, and he's like, they're like, your mother and father, they must be so proud of you or something. And he goes, they live in Paraguay.
Yeah, I did like that. Sorry.
Brilliant.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm fine.
I do this because I like bats.
Yeah.
Not in that way, but I like bats.
I just love it. It was something as so simple as, no, they're alive. Sorry, mate. Don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but that is like the light kind of humor that you want in a Batman comic. You want that, like, if you have the Frank Miller side of Batman where it's just grizzling, growling, everyone is so depressed, it does become quite heavy to read. But then you need that too. But then when there's just a little, like, my friends and I used to say, Christopher Nolan Batman films will have the Nolan humor, which is like the Bruce telling Alfred, he's like, I'm going to tell them it was all your idea. Stuff like that. The little humor. It's not
damn good television
movies like absolute like throwing jokes at your face. Like it's a little joke between friends that you can take, you can smile, and you'll keep going. That was this felt like when he's like, my parents are fine, and we know very well that he did have a rough night. He saw mannequins voice pointing strange, but then like he's like, I can't tell you. I was like, that was really horrible what you did. He's like, don't know what you're talking about, mate.
Could you imagine how horrible and oppressive and dark and claustrophobic this 5-issue story would be without those bits of humour? And like you said, James, and you're right, they're not shoehorned in like in certain superhero movies that right in the middle of a tense scene, they just throw in a stupid line of funny dialogue for the hell of it. It needed it to cut the tension, like to break a really rich dish with a bit of acidity. You need that to have the whole thing tasting right. And this story does it better than a lot, I think.
Yeah.
I think as well during those kind of manic Hugo Strange sections where he's talking to himself and he's like he's dressing up as the Batman. He's like, I'm the dark archetype, and he almost falls off the roof.
That was brilliant.
And like I know we were talking about the kind of dark, kind of toxic masculinity, misogyny inherent to this, but I think on the other side of that, it's almost like this guy is clearly bonkers. This is like it's almost like.
And he's got the brass cojones to say that Batman is. That's what, for me, is the funniest thing of all of it.
Again, like that, he's projecting his own kind of insecurities and inadequacies, like we're talking about, onto Batman. He's like, well, you're doing this because you have problems. You have this problem, this problem, this. You know, you've got this huge ego, but you don't have this. And again, like he thinks he's trying to figure out why he does it, and he's way off base. He's way off track. Like we know Batman, and we're like, oh, it's obvious he does this, he does that. But from someone outside looking in, trying to work out why someone would do this is I found it quite interesting. Like we just know Batman because he's part of our world. You know, is the Batman logo is more famous than, you know, the various religious symbols across the world. It's iconic in its own right, and we just know that story. We know exactly. We know the yellow oval. We know this. We know him inside out. We know the origin story. We know his parents get killed, even though they keep showing it us. You know, and that's interesting that he was like, okay, what if we didn't know anything about Batman? It was just this mythical creature. And again, they imply, again, a lot of the police officers are like, he must be supernatural. He must be a metahuman. He must be this. And again, just them trying to figure out who or what he is, while Gordon, like it's nice because we're in the know. Like we know who he is and where he's come from and what he's had to do to become Batman. And even Gordon, to a degree, while not knowing all the details, he knows what he's had to go through to get to the point where he's become Batman. But I love Hugo Strange trying to figure it out. But yeah, there is this campier side to those really dark and disturbing elements of his character as well, which is a little like, you know, I don't know, like Batman 66, like King Tut or something like that. Those kind of Egghead or those wackier kind of, you know, campier villains. And again, you know, there's a place. You know, I'm a big fan of the Mad Hatter, and you know, there's some of the more kind of outlandish villains. But I do like these more kind of darker, kind of more realistic takes on Batman villains as well.
You made me think that the 2 points there, I'm trying not to forget them. Oh no! This slips out of my head because you mentioned the Mad Hatter. I'm thinking about the hypnotizing hat now. That's like, oh no! Come back to me.
Sure.
I want to touch on something else you said, Dan. Actually, the whole Gordon not knowing everything, but knowing. And I've maintained from the very beginning that Gordon knew Bruce Wayne was Batman from the very start. He's a very, very good detective and one of the few straight shooting, honest police officers in Gotham City. Yes, he can't keep his sausage in his pants, and he's had a history of that in his life, which is made clearly evident, even though it's never stated obviously in Batman Year One. But he is a good cop and a fantastic detective. And I do believe that even before he saved the kid, even before I can't see a thing without my glasses, Jim has known that Batman was Bruce from the very beginning. And I do feel that is in the background of this story as well.
That you reminded me of one of the things I forgot. It was...
You're welcome.
Thank you. When you said about them all seeing he's supernatural, Gordon saw him save his son, and he wasn't in the Batman costume. He was in another disguise. So Gordon knows he's a man. That is the first and foremost thing that, like, half the people of Gotham are like, no, he's a demon. He's like a shadow. He's a monster. Like, Gordon saw this man jump off a bridge to save his baby son. Like, you're a man. Gordon, that for first and foremost, Gordon knows that he is a human being. And then thinking about what Steve said, there was a time when Gordon went to visit him, brought his wife with him for a nice little police interrogation, and Bruce had the
ginger beer in the champagne bottle.
And that you if you're Gordon there's got to be an inkling of, yeah, okay, you've got a cast on your leg. Batman did get shot in the leg yesterday, but it's fine. You were skiing and you're back today. The other thing I was thinking about was when you said, Dan, about projection. If you think about this story, that at some point in the story, every single character is projecting something from themselves on another character, you've just blown me away. Like, I'm thinking about, like, Hugo Strange projecting his little man feelings onto everyone, like Gordon projecting his doubt onto everyone, like, and Batman with a, like, am I doing this right? Am I really crazy? Like, if you put it as like a story of the Batman projection, then it's so much better. Like,
projection.
That's what I was thinking. I couldn't quite.
I like it.
But I think that ties in well with the character, though. And I think that's why Munch has used Hugo Strange as a psychologist, because I don't think he was necessarily a psychologist before, though I think he is quite the master manipulator and he's the intellect. I don't know if he was specifically a psychologist before this issue or this story.
He wore that coat, so he must be every kind of doctor.
Yeah. He's a mad scientist, so he's mad at all of the sciences. Yeah. But I think, again, like, this is like a deep dive into each character's psychosis and the obsession to be the best or to be better or to fill that void inside them, that gaping hole in their soul, one way or another. But yeah, I think it's wonderful. I think not a lot of Batman stories do, like, dive this, like, into the psychology quite as well or quite as intricately as this does.
Some do a bit more heavy-handedly as well, don't they? This is a lot more subtle and a lot more valid and realistic.
I agree, 100%. Yeah, and I think that's why it works as well. Like, and don't get me wrong, you still get all the entertaining classic Batman stuff. You get the fights, you get the kind of chases, you get the Batmobile, you get the Batarangs, you get all the good juicy Batman stuff. But you're getting something else. You're getting layer upon layer of this wonderful onion that's being unpeeled with each kind of issue and each kind of adding to the complexity and it's just a wonderful story. I'm so glad of all the Batman stories to pick.
So are we.
Yeah, I'm so glad, because I was like, I remember it being really good, but it was just a vague kind of remembrance. But I revisiting it, I was turning the pages as fast as I could just to finish it. So yeah, I feel epic.
Because sometimes when you come back to stories that you remember being excellent, you read them as a grown-up or as a mature adult, you think, did I really love this? Coming back into this after well over a decade, I think, since I've read it last, I totally see things I've probably forgotten or missed first time around, and I love it when a comic does that to you. And it's rare that any other media does do that to you on revisiting as much as comics do. But I do want to touch on something you both said about James, and James knowing that Batman is a human being, not a mythological creature of the night. That's why he trusts Batman. That's why he respects Batman, because this is a normal dude who put everything on the line to save my kid. That's why I'm going to work with him. That's why I trust him. Forget the vigilante, forget the cape, forget the car. This is a guy who's putting his own life, body and soul on the line every night. Why? Just to do the right thing. And that, I think, is probably one of the backbones of every great early years Batman story. And this one does it beautifully.
It's one of my favorite kind of relationships in comics, because I think there's such complexity. Again, we were talking about those layers. that, you know, obviously as a police officer, you're not supposed to, you know, say vigilantism is fine. It's perfectly all right. There's nothing wrong with that. It never goes wrong. But then Gordon knows how corrupt the police force is. He knows how corrupt Gotham is. He's seen it. You know, he's, you know, been involved in it, associated with it, if not, you know, 100% part of it. You know, he has been in and amongst that. And he knows that even he, as much as he's trying, he can't do it alone. And Batman knows he can't do it alone. And every time Gordon says something, or there's loads of lines in this where Gordon understands, he knows, he gets it. And it's like, and that's he's like, it's got to be Gordon. It can't be anybody else. There is no one else to help me and to assist me. You know, there is no Robin. There is no Batgirl. There is no, you know, Bat family. It's Gordon or nothing. And if he's not there, what does he have? And there is a desperation from Batman in this as well, because like the police are turning on him so much so he can't do what he needs to do. And it's becoming more and more difficult for him to even to go out and attempt to fight crime because he's too busy fighting the police, which he doesn't want to do.
We also see the what not to do to be a vigilante with the Night Scourge, who is a police officer who's able-bodied and strong and just like ultra violent. He loses it. He's a lunatic and he goes out and he kills. He beats violently, like for no other reason than criminal bad. Me must hit, like a caveman. And like obviously Batman, he's going for the bigger fish. Like he interrupts the drug bust to get the supplier, to get to the person who's bringing it in. Whereas these guys are like, oh, we almost got that drug dealer who's like this skinny little man who's like selling like little amounts. And it's like this Night Scourge is everything Batman shouldn't be and isn't. So it's like the road not taken as well. It's like a little watch for.
I think that's my favorite version of Batman stories where there is another vigilante. You know, there's a Red Hood or a Mask of the Phantasm. There's a, you know, Reaper from Year 2 or something where they're the dark version or the dark mirror of Batman. And usually it's yeah, and it's the dark archetype. You know, I think there's a mystery there. Like Hush is kind of a bit like that as well. He's not a vigilante, but it's somebody who's close to him. Someone's manipulating. All the rogues are kind of make an appearance as well in some form. But usually it turns out to be someone very close to Batman as well. And we see that kind of play out. I think that's my favorite type of Batman story. That's kind of a mystery. There's a personal link, but also there's a vigilante. You know, even the Batman, as we were talking about, is the Riddler being a vigilante. Yeah. You know, a dark vigilante, and again, it's a mystery. You can't work it out. He's using those detective skills, which I kind of miss in a lot of the Nolan stuff. Doesn't really touch on that as much as I would have liked it to. And that's my favorite version of a Batman story. I'm not saying that all Batman stories that aren't that bad, but I think it's one they seem to keep revisiting that idea again and again because it works.
How do we feel about Prometheus then as a villain? Parents were shot by police officers, dedicated his life to a criminal.
I was going to say the Wrath. I was going to say the Wrath because he was born the same night Batman was born.
Yeah, and he hates Jim Gordon because Jim Gordon, his parents were criminals and they were ended by the police. So I again agreed. I mean, that I think, and James and I have talked about this for hours, that what makes the best Batman stories is the psychology, is the fact that it's not just whap, bang, kapow, which we love. And it's there, like you said, Dan, perfectly. We get everything vintage Batman in this story that we could ever want. But it's the humanity, the layers, and the psychology that elevates stories like Prey above your standard fare when it comes to Batman. And that's why I'm really, really glad you brought it up as a subject, mate. Thank you.
My pleasure. Again, wonderful story. Great creators. Like you said, Doug Munch has worked on all these wonderful Batman stories. Like he did some of the 70s stuff, pre-crisis, post-crisis. I think he did Did he do the Batman?
He was part of the summit for. Oh yeah, he did Red Rain with Kelly Jones. Yeah.
Kelly Jones.
But in the main continuity, let's talk about Doug Munch for a second here. Yes, he did all that stuff in the 70s. His work ran into Detective Comics right through into the 90s. But this guy was involved in all the main famous Bat summits where once a year all the Bat titles would join up. So he was one of the masterminds behind Nightfall, Contagion, Legacy, Cataclysm, all the stuff that led up to No Man's Land. People always talk about your Denny O'Neills, your Steve Engleharts. But for me, Doug Moench and one other writer, Jim Starlin, are two of the most underrated Batman writers ever. Jim Starlin only wrote it for about a couple of years. But Moench is over a decade plus, and he's still throwing out Batman stories here and there, and they're all great. So, yeah. Respect to him.
I even love. I had a big deep dive into Moon Knight a few years ago. I got the big black and white essentials, and I think that's how you read Moon Knight, because he's basically black and white anyway. So you might as well just get the black and white copies. And they're wonderful stories, and they're not the typical Batman fare either. They're very kind of off kilter, very weird, strange, unusual. The character is, the villains are, completely off the wall, but in a wonderfully different way from the way he writes Batman. And again, because they are quite similar in a lot of ways. But no, I think he's a wonderful writer. I will, when I ever see his name, I'm like, we're in for something good. Speaking of which,
I'll buy a book with his name on it. Exactly.
Every time I go, right, yeah, that'll be good. That'll be, even if the art is probably not to my liking, I know the writing's going to be top tier. I will say there's a collection called Batman Arkham Hugo Strange, which is a kind of a loose collection of a lot of his like stories. And there's one that he wrote, and I think it might be an annual, and I think it's called Down to the Bone. And it's basically, we were talking about Born Again, and it's Hugo Strange ruining Batman's life without him even knowing. Like, he loses all the stocks at Wayne Enterprises. The police are after Batman, and then it's revealed at the end. It was like, I was the mastermind. But it was before even Born Again. So it was Born Again before Born Again, and using that character because he knows his identity.
Oh, I like that.
To strip away and destroy Batman. It's in that collection. Again, I'm not sure which kind of annual it is or issue, but I think it's called Down to the Bone. But yeah, it's a great little story. And again, and Munch knows the character. Like, even though, and again, he's written the classic version, he's written this version, I'm sure he's written another version of the character in some form. But again, every time nails it.
I like Born Again before Born Again, because everyone's tried to do Born Again after Born Again.
Yeah, and it's never worked.
No.
It's never worked. That's priceless, that series. But I have to say as well that with this story, I don't know if you guys are aware that Doug Moench and Paul Gulacy actually did a sequel a couple of years later in Legends of the Dark Knight. So I think because of how great this chat was, maybe we can revisit that story as well in later times. And I know, Dan, you've got a few up your sleeve. You want to talk about Shaman as well, which I definitely want to talk about. So bring it on, Bruddy.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I also, speaking of Starlin, again, I'm a big fan of his Batman work as well. As I said, I covered 10 Nights of the Beast on my podcast. I think KG Beast is a really underrated Batman rogue in general. He's one of those, unfortunately, because he's a big, strong guy. He's a big brute. All of a sudden, the writers just go, "Oh, he's stupid," because he's strong. He's stupid.
Chuck Dixon killed that character. And he's usually such a good writer.
I know. I tell you which one I did really like. I don't know if you've read Batman the Cult. That's a Jim Starlin one.
We love Batman.
Of course.
There we go then. There we go. Another wonderful one. So if you haven't covered that already, or if maybe I'll put my name on
10 Nights of the Beast is actually booked with Aussie Steve from Comics in Motion.
The Cult. I'll put my name on the Cult. If that's not,
we have to talk about that, because that was the first, way before Nightfall, way before Court of Owls. Batman is broken. Batman is gone. Batman has to fight his way back story. That was the first. And
Jason Todd fans out there, it was one of the only big times where
he's the hero.
Robin really showed off as a great sidekick.
Because Stalin didn't want to kill him, which is why one issue after A Death in the Family, Stalin left Batman.
Which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Well, they just re-released the alternate version, didn't they?
Yeah.
Jason Todd lives.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Lives.
I'm so sad that I actually compared the two issues side by side, page by page.
Oh.
But that's just me.
He's alive. He's alive.
Your own head cannon.
You don't want to be inside my head. They'd want to fire it out of the cannon. But anyway, I think unless you have anything to add, I think that's a perfect place to leave a wonderful conversation. So, Dan, mate, huge hugs and kudos for bringing this one to us. I loved rereading it. I'll probably read it again, actually, before we even read Shaman or whatever else. But yeah, we've got some lovely things coming up. So stay tuned and you will come back, won't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you'll have me. If I've if I've not brought my own dark psychological issues and projected them on you too much, then yeah, absolutely. I'll 100% come back. It's been a blast talking about Batman and Hugo Strange as well. A very kind of underrated one of his rogues gallery. Not one of the most outlandish ones, but I think one that's has had his time in the sun, but kind of deserves a little bit more as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we know he ain't dead.
Our guests on Detective Comics never really gone.
Yeah,
he's
good. He's good at. If you think the Joker is good at escaping near-death scenarios,
Hugo Strange is every bit, if not better.
Yeah, absolutely. He made it. If anything, he invented that. Looks like he's probably dead, but will come back in some form.
He is currently dead in current canon. Just so you guys are aware.
Not for long.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. And the pages of Harley Quinn was where he met his end.
Okay.
That was a good story, that was. Really fun.
There you go.
Brilliant. All right, so Dan, let our viewers, listeners know more about Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls, what you do and where we can find you, sir.
So quite simply, it's Spider-Dan and the Secret Bores. That's BORES, as in boring, but the podcast is not anything like that. I cover lots of kind of very obscure comic books or kind of underrated movies, cult films, weird, wacky, and wild. It's going to get very strange. We've got lots of weird podcasts coming up. We've got Johnny Monomics coming up. We're going to cover quite soon. And then Rhea Carrigan's going to come on and we're going to talk top 5 films featuring full frontal male nudity. So,
okay, then.
Yes. So we're going to get our own Batwangs out.
Batman Damned. Biggest selling comic of the year. Why? Because you see Batman's Willie.
Exactly. Yes. Sold out everywhere. I did a podcast not so long ago, a couple of years ago now, where we did controversial comic book moments, and that was one of them in there. So that might be one to listen to as well. But yeah, lots of comic book stuff on there. Lots of weird. I did a weird sex scenes one as well. Weird film sex scenes. If you want to listen to that, again, very weird stuff. So very off kilter, very weird, very odd. There's an episode for everybody. Even if you don't like one episode, you'll find one for you. There's Star Wars, there's you name it. I've covered everything. A lot of Batman, surprisingly, as well, in various different forms. We did Batman Noel, just Christmas just gone, which is an excellent story. Yeah, that's a really good one. But yeah, so Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls, you can find all the links to the podcast. You can find my collaborations. You can go and find the YouTube channel, all of the social medias, all of the wonderful stuff. So Spider-Dan and the secretballs.com and use the hashtag #PrepareForPrattle because you will get, as you've noticed, you will get that from me wherever I go.
From those descriptions, remember to have safe search turned off.
Yeah, not safe for work, a lot of these podcasts. Definitely.
And for me, you can find me on X as James Attias DC27, and you can read my prattlings about all things comic book, my reviews on darkknightnews.com.
Speaking of, I write there too. And you can read my prattlings and hear my voice across Dark Knight News, DC Comics News, and My Baby Fantastic Universes just by typing Steve J. Ray or Fantastic Universes into your search engine of choice, and that'll take you to all my mindless ramblings across every part of the internet, whether you like it or not. But until you do, this has been issue 4 of Detective Comments featuring Batman Prey by Doug Moench and Paul Galassi.
Join us again, same bat time, same bat channel.